I would love to say a brief welcome before you dive
Hey,
in. Hi, how's it
how are you?
going? It's good. It's good to meet you all. I really appreciate you. I'm Tracy Burt from Teach for the Bay from the conference team, and I really appreciate all three of you being here today. I can stay for the first half an hour, so I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to everyone, this work is so important. And one of the presenters, Rosemary Wren, was talking today about when children that actually children not seeing themselves reflected and not having tools to understand the experiences that they're having in the world, whether it's being reflected everywhere or not being reflected at all, and also dealing with discrimination. Those are profound experiences that shape us for the rest of our lives, and we can save children's lives
Yes.
through this work. And we can also, I'm white, and I wish that I had ethnic studies in my growing up, because I would like to have a right-sized idea of who I am in the world as a white person, right? Not a supersized version of who I am, or an entitled version. So I feel like this work is for everybody. It's really important, and I just really appreciate the three of you spending this time with us. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Tracy, this is Tontra Love. I'm not sure if you've had correspondence with Tontra. She is, well, you'll hear in the introductions, and Katy, the co-presenter.
Hello.
All right. So let's get started. I'm scared. Okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna just go in there. I'm gonna go back to the old school style here. I tried to be fancy and have two screens, but I'm too nervous. Okay. Let's see. Think this will work. Nope. Hang tight, folks. I keep losing my Zoom. Katy or Tantra, I think you're gonna have to
Yeah, I can share my screen.
slide share for me because I just keep losing my Zoom.
Okay,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
one moment.
So while Katy is pulling up our slide deck, I will also drop the slide deck in the chat for you all. And let's take a few minutes to introduce ourselves in the chat. Our name, our pronoun, our site, and our position, and just add a couple words of how you identify. And I can give you an example as well. So, I've got myself in the chat. And while we share ourselves, we can.
Me, I'm me. Who are you? Let's take a tour of it. Top of the class, sever the blue, switch on your shoe. It's a good look when you wear what you want to wear. There's a unique cut of your hair. You're so pretty and so debonair. You're a beautiful soul to be shared. Be who you want to be. Who you want to see when you walk down the street. Be who you want to be. You think of and it makes you feel free. Be who you want to be. And it makes you feel good when you think that's me. Be who you want to be. All you got to do, really, really, you'll see. Yeah. Who you wanna be? Just gotta be. Who you wanna be? Just gotta be. Just gotta be.
Top of the class, I got more A's in the alphabet test. Living my best, proud of myself like a pat on the back. Loving this black skin that I'm in, I was destined to win. Support my friend, queer liberation. Put your hands up high, celebration. Hands to the sky, elevation. Every day's a new one. You win some, lose some, and you're a new son. And I'm a new son. I'm making more moves. The law's a new time. We all equal because we human. My people, I feel like you. Latifah, does you win? Why be angry when we can love each other? Friend, family, mother, daughters, and our brothers. It don't matter the gender, and it don't matter the color. Don't care if you're blue, care if you're green, care if you're pink. I want you to think about what you want and how you can share. You're part of the world, we're loving the air. Speak your truth, somebody hears. Don't ever think that nobody
All right. get started because we have a lot to cover today. So welcome everybody. We are so glad you are here. What we just listened to was our Bay Area own Alphabet Rockers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Alphabet Rockers, but they're a hip hop children's music collective located here in Oakland. And their work is focused on education and diversity and a healthy lifestyle, all that good stuff. So let's go to our next slide. All right, here's our agenda for our time together. It's packed, so we're gonna try to go as quickly as we can. And oh, I didn't drop the slide deck. Tontra, do you think you can drop, because Katy is navigating? Thank you. Tontra will drop the slide deck and the agenda so you can follow along and have all the resources available to you. So we are going to continue with introductions. We're going to have some time connecting with each other, followed by a ritual that's deeply embedded in our ethnic studies work that acknowledges our land. And then we will continue with one more community builder, an overview of what ethnic studies looks like in the elementary classroom, followed by the heart of the presentation today, which is how it shows up for our youngest learners, specifically in the TK classrooms. And then we'll leave some time for questions and evaluation forms. So let's get started. Next slide. All right. I'm Leah Aguilera, and I'm the TSA for that supports elementary, early childhood education all the way up through 8th grade in history, social studies, and ethnic studies in OUSD. And I will pass it off to Tontra, and maybe then Tontra can share to Katy.
Hi, my name is Tontra Love, and I am a teacher on special assignment and coach for transitional kindergarten in Oakland Unified School District. I also support some of our early learnings through the early childhood department as well. And I will pass it on to Katy. Katy, you're muted.
I'm Katy. I'm a TK teacher in San Leandro Unified School District. And I'm happy to be here. We wanted to also appreciate Dr. Wanda Watson, who is a professor at Mills College. She's now at San Jose State, for bringing us all together, Tontra, Leah, and I.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Tontra.
Yeah, so we're going to do a little bit of getting to know one another. And while that happens, I just saw that people need permission for the decks. So I will do that as soon as we go into breakout rooms. But in the breakout room, we want you to reintroduce yourselves and maybe share the first time you recall your identity as a person being celebrated or reflected in the classroom. And depending on who's in your room, maybe think about who has the next birthday coming up, and you can do it that order, or you can just randomly jump in. But as we jump into breakout rooms, I will, Leah opened the slide deck. So thank you, Leah. And thank you for being very patient with all the Zoom issues that always come up no matter how long we do this. So Leah, are you gonna open up those breakout rooms?
Let's do. We're going to do a couple small ones so we can get to know groups of people. All right, they should be there. I'm going to go join. Let me put.
Okay, and I'm going to broadcast the question if I can. Okay, I just broadcast the question from the chat. And am I timing this, Leah?
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think we said
We're already 15 in, so maybe
2 minutes.
let's. We had 30 people
Who signed up to come?
last minute, yeah. I mean, 3:30 is a hard time for the teachers.
Yeah.
Nobody's left in the chat. Nobody's left in the waiting room.
No, I think they're all in there. Yeah. Okay.
3:42.
Yeah, 3:44. We can close them.
That sounds good.
And then it takes a minute to close, and some people come back right away. It's,
Yeah, it takes a minute.
yeah.
Should we ask to hear some of the responses? Hi,
Sure. Welcome.
Hi.
we're just coming back from breakout rooms.
Oh, okay. I was like,
Yeah, we're having people introduce themselves about,
okay.
and I just put the slides and agenda, the first time that your identity was celebrated or recognized in your
Okay.
life.
For a second, I was like, did no one like register for this? Because that would be insane.
All right.
Welcome back, everyone.
All right. We're all back. All right. Well, we'd love to hear from some of you all. If there's anybody that would like to share some of the responses around when was the first time you remember your identity being celebrated or reflected in the classroom. You can come off mute, you can write it in the chat. Think about your earliest experiences. Or just promise me that you talked with one another about it and tried to recall.
We promise. Our group definitely talked.
All right, wonderful. So we can go to the next slide then. We're a little bit behind our schedule, but we will catch up. As part of our ethnic studies practice, part of it is recognizing the work, that liberated ethnic studies model has done, and what they actually call the double helix of ethnic studies. And it's really just the relationship between like critical consciousness and holistic humanization. So to ground ourselves in ethnic studies work, one of the practices that we do, especially with our lesson planning, is we offer both a land and an ancestor acknowledgement. But both of those could use their own PD to define and to practice. So today we're only going to share a land acknowledgement. So a land acknowledgement is a global Indigenous practice. That's where it started, right? And it looked different. I can go into that too, but it is a global Indigenous practice. More recently, though, it's become this formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous people as traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. It calls us to understand the history that has brought us to reside in this land and to understand your place within that history. It's a commitment to address that colonialism is a current and ongoing process, and that we need to build our mindfulness and of our present participation. I have linked a ton of resources for you in ways that you can participate in those, and those are linked on slide 38. We're not going to go through them right now, but this next slide right here is our OUSD, one OUSD version of a land acknowledgement that we use. So as I read this land acknowledgement, please drop into the chat either the unceded land from which you are joining us today, or maybe just one thing you love about the natural environment of the Bay Area. So you can think about trees or birds or bugs or the moss that lives in the cracks in the concrete. Or maybe your favorite park or plants or flowers, you get it, skies, the way the light shines through the window, okay? Just let's honor our natural environment and make that conscious connection. So I acknowledge Huichin, the unceded land of the Lejan Lomi. people to whom this land belongs. The Lajan Ohlone are still here, and they speak the Chochenyo language. I stand in solidarity with all Indigenous people and their right to self-determination and justice by recognizing the treaty rights and the Indigenous people as the rightful stewards of this land. I commit to working toward the healing of generational trauma, theft, and dispossession Native people have faced and continue to face by listening to and supporting the current needs of the Indigenous people or the Indigenous community. Whew, gets me every time. So the next slide is filled with resources for you. These are ways that people have created land acknowledgements for the TK through about second grade classrooms. There's all sorts of links here. Our very own, again, Alphabet Rockers, if you click that top link on your own, you'll hear their land acknowledgement. If you click land acknowledgement 1 and 2 on your own at another time, you will see students, OUSD students, reading out their own language, land acknowledgements. And then there are several links about you as an educator, how you can do this process with your students. All right, next slide. Community building.
Okay, so we are going to have a chance to share again, but this time via a Jamboard. So Leah will put the link into the chat and you can go ahead and join the Jamboard and think about these 2 questions. You can either pick one, or if you have time, you can answer both. So what is ethnic studies to you? And where has ethnic studies shown up in your life? So we wanted to leave it open to your life in case, of course, maybe it hasn't shown up at all in your education or in the school setting. So just in general, you could think about your life or education as well.
Okay, put the Jamboard in, I will re-put it in. Just another way to ground ourselves in this work.
The link shows that it's a view only, I think.
Really?
Did anyone else see that?
I'm gonna fix it right now. Funny, because we went through last night and changed all these settings. Okay, you all should be editors. Thank you for letting us in.
And the agenda says we're going to give you about 5 minutes, but just be looking at time, I think we might do about 3, and people can feel free to keep adding to it as we go on.
And from your responses, I know you guys have good ideas. My responses from the sign up, the Google sign up.
And if anyone has never used a Jamboard and just needs a little bit of instruction, please just unmute and let us know.
Absolutely.
So we can just go ahead and start writing
Yeah.
however you want, with a pen, with a sticky note, whatever we decide.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
I will play this. It's very short. It's probably a perfect amount of time. I hope you can hear it.
California, there are in excess of 250 languages, 250 distinct cultures and communities. Becoming familiar with these nations, these peoples is so very important.
Coast Miwok,
Bay, Miwok,
Karkin,
Chichenyo,
Tanian,
Ramatush,
Aswaswa,
Ramsian, Chalon,
Selenium,
Esalen. Those are just a few of what we recognize Central Coastal California.
Bay Area.
This album was recorded on a lonely land with our community, you.
You're powerful.
You are brave.
You're brilliant. You believe me.
You ask questions.
You listen. You accept me. You stand up for people who don't look like you. You make new friends.
You show us that we are still changing.
You are legacy.
There's only one you.
You are the love.
You are the love.
That was perfect timing.
Perfect. Thank you.
And yeah, and as things come up for you, please feel free to jump back into the Jamboard anytime you need to.
All right, Katie, I think we're on slide 10. There we are. So recognizing that we are only able to do this work because of those shoulders that we rise upon. And I bet some of you already know this, but the ethnic studies movement is local, and it started out of the Third World Liberation Strike at San Francisco State, which I think actually still holds the record as the largest university strike. Later, it was followed by the UC Berkeley strike in 68 and 69. But from that movement came our university classes and ethnic studies departments, right, in college. And then those ethnic studies classes influenced our high school courses and curriculum. And then we see things like AB 101 get passed, which now requires ethnic studies in 9th grade. But then from there, we're starting to see board resolutions come about where we're actually integrating and designating ethnic studies courses in early childhood all the way through. Next slide. Next slide, Katie. All right. So in OUSD, we developed this definition and framework, and this is what guides our work around liberatory ethnic studies. Next slide. This framework led us to the 4 key themes of our work. These themes are presented throughout every grade level. So identity, culture, and origins is in pre-K as well as it is in 12th grade. The lessons that come out of these themes address our standards, and they're presented in developmentally appropriate ways through our very own ethnic studies standards. Next slide. So this is dense. You don't need to read it, the next 2 slides. I just wanted to point out that we have developed standards for pre-K, TK, and K, and that each of these grade levels touch on those 4 themes. So you can see the 4 themes at the top, and with the developmentally appropriate learning objectives. Awesome. So one more slide. Perfect. And as we go through these 4 themes, this is the heart of the presentation, you can draw connections back, because we're going to show you several examples of how these themes show up in our classrooms.
Okay, so theme 1 is identity, origins, and culture. We'll share a few examples, something that both Tontra and I do, A Life Like Mine, and then also knowing our families and self-portraits.
All right, so I was also an ethnic studies major, so it was really exciting. I saw on the Jamboard how lots of people said ethnic studies is always in my life because that's the world we live. And Leah and I have taught together, and so have Katy and I. And back in the day, Leah and I were thinking about this concept of highlighting a student. People called it Star Student, Student of the Week. And there was this great book called A Life Like Mine, and Leah and I were like, you know, that speaks to me more. So every week a student is highlighted and families are given ideas of what to do, and like how kids come into our lives in all different ways, where they can share things that are important to them, favorites, highlights in their life, ways that they celebrate. And each day the kids get to come in and share and bring artifacts, and families are invited to share stories, to share food. And we learned that during COVID, made that even more possible and accessible. Families that weren't able to come into the classroom, they could do a Zoom recording and Zoom in, and we could watch a little documentary. And every week, a new student was highlighted, and we really learned about everyone, and it was a great way to build community. And it's still me, sorry. So it's really important, like that is like the beginning, you know, like as every child gets the chance to shine of knowing their families, but we want every family to feel like they're connected. So having welcome boards where families are shown on the walls, and family is defined by each individual student and the family they come from. And so we let people define it. Sometimes people do family trees. I used to do a flower pot kind of thing with petals. So I would ask the families, like, tell me about your child. Tell me like something funny, like a great funny story or a special story that you would want to share. Tell me a tradition that you like, which could be like, you know, going out on to dinner, or like movie night on Fridays, or a special holiday that you share. Who are the people that you consider family? And that's what we represented. And then we also created a recipe book, and at the end of that, people brought in their favorite recipes, which ranged from like family recipes that had been passed down to like, oh, I go out and buy chocolate chip cookies and we put whipped cream on them. But everyone got to see what was important. So it's really important for families and bring them in, and then have a wall where they're reflected as well.
Yes, and I'd like to add that one of the things that I did in my classroom was, in my family, my I guess they would be I don't know, my cousin's kids are, we call them my cousins, but they're not, or my nieces, and it doesn't match up to our you know, American typical family tree lineup. So one of the things that I did in my classroom was we turned the tree into a vine, and we allowed the kids to grow the vine in any way that they want and branch it off in any way that they want. And as long as they can show sort of how it gets to themselves as them, and they were the center leaf of the vine. So there's many ways to do this.
Okay, so a big part of the TK year is really developing self-identity. The kids are all 4, about to turn 5, and this is a really crucial stage in the development of having like a positive self-identity. And so one of the main projects that I do in my classroom is self-portraits, and this happens in multiple mediums, multiple ways. You can see on the left, one of my students had just mixed his shade of skin paint, and that was to create sort of like a realistic self-portrait. And then on the right side, this was a more abstract portrait that we did towards the end of the year. And this was a big photograph of them surrounded by collage that represented who they were. So they're given multiple opportunities throughout the year to not only show who they are, but what they love, what they look like, and who they are on the inside as well. And this happens through art as well as through poetry. And I have a couple of examples of some poetry. This was back when we were virtual. So this was via Seesaw. The first one is based on the book, I Am Every Good Thing by Derek Barnes. And I will play Noah's poem.
I am every good thing. I am a good helper, and I am a good friend. I am every good thing. I care about my dad, my mom, my brother, and I care about my friends, Miss Katy. I feel happy, and I feel hopeful. I am not you. I am every good thing. I could help my parents, and I could write my name. I am every good thing. I am me, and I am worthy to be loved.
And then this next one is based on the poem Where I'm From by George Ella Lyon. So they created their own Where I'm From poems.
Where I'm from. I'm from a gray building with a black fence, from a big kitchen table and a lot of toys. I'm from red roses because they remind me of my mom. I'm from my mom and my dad from speak both language. I'm from strawberry, watermelon, and cevapi. I'm from San Leandro, Bosnia, and Velika Kladuša.
So you can see through both of these examples that they're really given an opportunity to affirm who they are, who their family is, where they come from. And that's just, you know, the main goal, especially at the beginning of their school career. Okay, I'll pass it to
And so, thank you. We're going to move on to theme 2, which is power, privilege, and oppression. And those are the things we're going to talk about as we go forward.
Okay, the first example we'd like to share is a few ways that we engage families in sharing about their ethnic identity and what cultural traditions are important to them. And this fits into theme 2 in that we're not assuming anything about the families, and we're not just holding the power on our own, but rather we're valuing their input and their knowledge and their relationship with their child as their first teacher. So these are 2 surveys that I do. The first one on the left is a celebrations and cultural traditions survey. So this is really surface level, just what holidays are important to you, and do you want to contribute to us learning about them in the classroom? And I do emphasize that we're not celebrating everybody's holiday, but we're learning about it. We can all learn about it. And then on the right is an ethnic identity survey. And I'll show some examples of some responses to that. So this came out of sort of a research project that I was doing to understand, because my students are so young, I wanted to get the support of their families to know how they identify ethnically. Because my students are 4, they might not be able to say it, to verbalize it. But I'm sure that if I had some information like, oh, my family celebrates the Mid-Autumn Festival, then when I'm reading a story about it to the class, then I can say, oh, you know, so-and-so, your family celebrates this, right? So having the input from the families helps me to build those connections with the students. So these are just some responses from one of the surveys. And I've also, rather than doing a survey, I've also had these conversations in person with families during conferences. And sometimes they're a bit surprised to be asked like, oh, what's your ethnic identity? But that's just because they aren't asked that often, or they don't, in a school space, that's not often asked of them. So I think that surprise is really telling about how important it is really to bring that into the school setting.
Yeah, and as we know, if you've spent any time with kids, our brains as humans developmentally categorize each other all the time. What's the same? What's different? What do I know? So at a young age, if we can uplift all of that, as this is a really positive thing, these are great questions to ask and things to wonder, and it builds and changes as we grow. We're really giving our kids great stepping stones for how they are in the world and how they relate and connect to others. The other piece about your culture is about your language, and language is different, and people speak different dialects of English as well as many other languages that we know of. In OUSD, our preschool does a great little survey that you're going to see, where it really asks about what languages do you use, what are your expectations, because what we know about kids who are multilingual learners is that we want to embrace and uplift those languages and have them carry it through, that it's so important to be using home languages at home and really making sure that that is just as important as being able to communicate in English in the classroom. And so we really want to bring that in and bring the family in, and also really explain our thinking when people ask questions of why we do it and why it's important. These are the ways we build community. This is how we have a bigger global perspective of the world. And this is how we support, because we want to make sure that in times where families need translation or if families aren't literate, that we're offering all these opportunities to bring ourselves together as a community. And especially in the younger ages, we talk about when we're learning to read and develop, the big piece is oral language. And we all, in all of our cultures, have a history of singing and storytelling. And we want that to be just as important in school as learning how to read text in a book. And so it all begins with that and what kinds of conversations people are having at home as well.
Okay. This next slide is from a unit around power. And we started explaining to the students what power is and the different types of power and what it means to have power, what you can do with power, how you can create positive change with power. So in this assignment, students were noticing the power dynamics on the playground, and they were asked to design a more equitable playground. And this particular student wrote, I can barely see it. Let me see if I can blow it up for just a second so I can read it to you. Okay, I can see it. Sorry, I have my glasses on. So this student wrote, our playground at school now is equitable because people who like to play basketball can play basketball. People who like to play soccer can play soccer. People who want to sit around can sit around. People who want to play on the play structure itself can do that. Right now, it's good, but that's because we don't have any students who use a wheelchair. If we did have students use a wheelchair, we would need ramps on the play structures. And those comments that this student made led to actually the next conversation that we had. And that was, perhaps that's why we don't have students in wheelchairs, right? Because the lack of ramps. And what would the messaging be if we did have ramps, right? So how do we change the conversation instead of just thinking the status quo is okay, but actually pushing our students to think in a more equitable way? All right, so moving on to theme 3, resistance and liberation. We're going to share how we co-create our norms and a really incredible migration unit.
So in terms of creating classroom norms that we might have grown up with, depending on your generation, as rules in the classroom, it's really agreements that we want to come to together. And the why behind this, which is really important, is why do we build community? Why is it important? How do we do it? How do we make each other feel safe and honored in the classroom? So having a chance to have a conversation with your students about what's important, and then guiding them into simple language, and not just simple language, but depending on the age group, a few simple things that they can focus on. So, you know, like when you first talk to littles, they always say like, oh, no hitting, no biting, no spitting, no kicking, right? And so you're like, oh, we're safe with our bodies, right? So we're honoring all the different things that they bring and really putting into what as a community can we do together. And these are the questions as educators that we should ask ourselves as we're going into these settings. How do you build an identity safe and courageous classroom for all students to feel safe to share their stories and who they are? And today I was in a TK classroom all day, and that was my job today, was like pulling kids and helping them have conflict resolution and use I statements and be really restorative. And my questions were was it safe? Was it kind? Did you do your best? Because they could wrap their heads around it. And then it leads to these deeper conversations.
Okay, I'll share a bit about a unit that I developed. Really, I mean, this fits into theme 3, resistance and liberation. This was developed as sort of an act of resistance to the socio-political environment and this idea that, you know, immigrants, migrants are not welcome here. I wanted to send a big message to my school community. Yes, they are. And And so that's what this came out of. And even though the students are young, they are feeling this still. They want to feel this sense of belonging, like Tontra said. And this is this unit was sort of meant for them to unpack not only their own stories, but also the stories of each other and older students, maybe middle schoolers or just upper grade students who are newcomers to our district. So these are the guiding questions for the unit. We start with who are the first people to live here. And so really understanding who the Indigenous people are, understanding that they still live here and they're a big part of our community. So not just looking at it as something from the past. Where do I live now and where did my family used to live? So this is an opportunity for families to not only trace back their ancestors, because many families might not know actually exactly where their ancestors are from, but they could look at just, oh, I used to live in Washington and my family moved to San Leandro. So just looking at the act of moving to somewhere and what it's like to move and to have to uproot your life somewhere and bring it somewhere else. Then we look at why do people move? And this is personal reasons all the way to like systemic reasons, like, oh, they had to move. And this is through individual stories and also through some amazing books, picture books. We look at what is the individual experience of being a newcomer, again, through books and also through interviewing older students about their experience. And then really moving into like, how can we welcome someone to our school if they are new? What does that look like? And how does valuing people from many different places make our community stronger? So if you're interested in this unit, I can definitely share more. This is just sort of the basic structure of it. Okay.
Yeah, and oh,
go ahead.
Our next unit is going to be called Taking Action.
Okay, so action really emerges out of what's important to your community. And I'll share a little bit about a project that has been happening over the past 2 years in my school community. We were renaming our school, and we actually successfully do have a new name now. You can see back here, it's Halkeen Elementary, and we used to be named Woodrow Wilson Elementary. And through project-based learning, our students were able to learn about why names are important, about the history of how schools get their name, about Woodrow Wilson, both maybe some of his positive contributions, but also some of his racist policies and actions. We learned about why a community would want to change their name. So we were looking at other schools that had done so in the area. And then we really looked deeply at San Leandro history. And we thought about what would be a name that reflects who we are and honor where we live. And through this 2-year process, we ended up deciding on Halkeen Elementary. And Halkeen is the Halkeen Ohlone people were the first people to live on this land. They are still on this land. And we were very lucky to be able to partner with Mr. Vincent Medina, who is Halkeen Ohlone, to educate us about his culture. And it was just a very beautiful process and a really meaningful sort of action project for the students. So I'll just share this quick clip from the news.
As America re-examines the history of racial injustice, one school in San Leandro will soon be changing its name.
And as KPIX5's John Ramos reports, they'll be looking for something that they say is a better fit for the neighborhood.
Wilson Elementary is the latest school to undergo a social reckoning, named after a man who has very little in common with this community. All of the elementary schools in the San Leandro Unified School District are named after past presidents, but Woodrow Wilson is a bit of a disconnect.
It's difficult to support the name of a school that would not be supporting the current community.
Elected in 1912 as America.
Okay, I'll stop there for the sake of time.
As America re-examines.
Okay.
I just want to add though that Katy's TK classroom was really the epicenter for this project. Yes, it expanded and grew into the whole community and the whole school, but our youngest learners actually propelled this project forward.
All right, we would love to take questions now. You can feel free to put them into the chat or unmute and say them out loud. And I will stop share so we can see each other.
Yeah, and if you don't have questions, but you have other things that you've been doing or things that you've uplifted in your own lives that you would like to share, we would all, I think, love to hear about it.
We do have a question in the chat from Megan. Oh, she just wants to know if we have a time machine. No, we can't take you back. I wish we could. We're working on that. Katie's TK classroom was going to develop that.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, I just am worried it's a little too specific to me. So I don't want to take time from the presentation. I think my question is, so I'm here, I am not an elementary school teacher. My most pertinent role here is that I'm a teacher on special assignment in Santa Cruz City schools for history, social studies, and I actually work with secondary primarily, but my role this year is including basically leading the development of our ethnic studies program, which, because I work with secondary, like one part of that is the 9th grade course requirement. But the other thing that our district leadership would like me to lead is like developing a K through 12 integrated ethnic studies plan. And so I'm here because I don't know very much about elementary, it's not my area of specialty, and I wanted to hear what ethnic studies looks like in elementary school. And my question is, these are wonderful assignments, and in a lot of ways I'm thinking like, gosh, I feel like they apply, all kinds of age level. Like it easily could be adapted to, all up through high school. But is the work you're doing in your schools in a context like that? Like you're one kind of part of the ethnic studies experience of students as they move through your districts, or, are you, how, I guess I'm curious about how integrated what you're doing is with your schools and your districts and teachers of multiple grade levels.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have my position. Like we have very similar positions in the district. And we're in a consortium, so you can contact me on the side where we talk with other Bay Area districts around ideas and how to work with this, with integrating ethnic studies into the traditional history, social studies curriculum. So in Oakland, because of who we are as Oakland, right? It started out of our students, our high school students asked for it about 10 years ago. We created a board resolution. Our first board resolution was 2015. And out of that, we had a goal of having ethnic studies in every single classroom by 2023. We met that goal this year. So this is the first year that we actually are offering at every single high school, there is an ethnic studies course that a student can take. So we're a little bit ahead of AB 101, right? Just slightly. And then from there, we developed cohorts of teachers, and our teachers built out year-long courses, right? So I know Castro Valley Unified developed courses that stay true to the 4 domains of ethnic studies, right? African American studies, they stayed that way. We developed courses, there's still ethnic studies courses, but they're more integrated, and I can drop in our website and you can check those out there. Once we had the 9th grade solidified a little bit as a designated ethnic studies, we began to pull in all of our grade levels. Another resolution was passed that talked about integrating ethnic studies. And so that gave the teachers the backing to go, okay, I want this. Where are our resources? How do we create this? So we started creating teacher cohorts, and we're in our 3rd year now. This summer we had over 100 participants. So we're working on both curriculum development and what it is to have sort of a mindset, an ethnic studies lens, and really understand the pedagogy that's needed. Out of that, we pushed again. Every time we just keep pushing a little bit more, right? So we have now, we're building spaces and one-off lessons or one-off units for teachers to integrate into ELA, into history, social studies, into science with an ethnic studies lens. But we also just got the approval to build a 3rd grade designated ethnic studies course. So if a child stays with us throughout their career, they will have a 3rd grade year-long designated ethnic studies as well as a 9th grade. Everything else will be integrated. But that's just one model. Berkeley started with the community. They did listening sessions with their, right? Because that's Berkeley and how they work. So every district is kind of approaching it in a different way, but I'd be happy to connect with you on the side around how to kind of go from that maybe 101 requirement and then fill in, yeah, the middle school and the elementary school.
Yeah, that would be great. I appreciate that. And again, I'm sorry if I've taken your time for a pretty specific situation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
And I think it was a great question that like benefits all of us, because I think once you have that lens and you know what you're looking for, you see it everywhere, right? And we know that if students feel seen, heard, and connected, they're going to thrive. The teachers that do that for them are the teachers they continue to go back to. And those are the teachers that usually have a better time at integrating who are my students and my families and how do I uplift that. And so that is a really important base. And also like you come across things or kids read things, and how do we be critical, right? How do we say, oh, we love this, but we're also seeing that it's missing this element or it's being exclusive of a certain group, and how do we build that inclusivity? So I just feel like it's a great question for all of us to hear and be a part of the answer.
And on slide 38, there's sort of like 8 questions to ask yourself. It applies to every educator at all ages, but just how are you framing your, either if you're building a lesson or you're actually, implementing the plan, how are you framing this with an ethnic studies lens? It's like a first step, just something to keep in mind. And sometimes that's easier because what's happening, right, especially with AB 101 is we're in a place now where we're asking teachers to take on roles that they may or may not be comfortable with, right? So how do we get them, they want to do it, but they just don't know how, or they've never, so those bite-sized pieces that actually show them, okay, here's sort of your first step.
Those are great slides. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me put this website in. Okay, it's ethnicstudies.ousd.org. It's a work in progress. I just learned how to build a website, but it is there, and it does have, links to curriculum so you can see what's there. It has our principles, a little history of how we got started, a video, so check it out. We'd love to also hear how other people are integrating this work, if that's a prompt that you'd like to share.
I can share, a little bit about San Leandro because it is different than what's happening in Oakland. And I know some people might share my situation where there is not an ethnic studies curriculum yet in their district. So we are in the process of creating a custom social studies curriculum. This emerged 2 years ago when we piloted a couple of social studies curriculums and decided that none of them were updated enough for us. Basically, they had a lot of issues in them still. And we decided to create a custom curriculum using the Learning for Justice, social justice standards, the history standards, and developing our own social justice framework for it. So that has been in development and we're still working on that. And then after that, we're supposed to be starting our ethnic studies curriculum. So what I do in my classroom, some of it is a part of the social studies curriculum that I'm a part of designing, but some of it is just happening only in my classroom and not necessarily being supported like as they move through the grade levels yet. So hopefully that's coming up in the future. But.
Yeah, I think that that's really interesting also because there isn't a lot of curriculum developed with an ethnic studies lens for the PK to K classroom, which actually kind of reminds me of the late 70s, early 80s before the textbook market took over. There's an opportunity to really cultivate the knowledge from within. And we know that our teachers know the best of the community. And so we're really we're drawing on our own resources, right? Which is one of the principles around community wealth and community assets. And so like San Leandro was able to use their teachers to really build out this curriculum. And we're able to do that for our 3rd grade unit as well. But we do have a partner. So we are working with CRE. We are working with the keynote speaker of today's session.
And I think the other thing is as we just in TK, we adopted curriculum for the whole district. And we use this ethnic studies lens as part of our rubric as we were looking at different curriculums for our adoption committee. And so I think those are other ways in which ethnic studies plays a part in what you adopt, whether you have a full-blown ethnic studies department or not. Those are really critical questions that get you thinking about what is the curriculum? Are we creating students who are leaders and learners and teachers in the classroom where they're giving as much input around their learning as we are supporting them in that? And then I just wanted to point out that Kathleen put the evaluation in the chat and the feedback form. So please make sure you do that. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. And if you'd like, there is a certificate available that shows your time and that you participated, and just reach out and I will gladly send that to you with your name printed in it. And check out the rest of the slides and the links. Pretty cool stuff there. All right.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the night.
Thank you for coming.